How's it going? My name is Willie Abercrombie. I'm a student at TCC, and today we're going to be talking about racial inequality in public schools as it pertains to Black children. Today we're going to be using our critical thinking skills, my personal experience, and statistical data to go over the topic and see if we can come to an understanding of why it's happening. So we'll start with critical thinking. If students are represented, if students have accurate representation, do they perform better or worse? I think the answer across the board is a resounding yes. Not just students, but representation seems to matter in everyday life, in spaces where there are minorities and groups that are underrepresented in the public eye or in mass. Um, Another way that we can use critical thinking to kind of come into this topic is we live in Washington State. The population of Black people is under 20%. Public schools in America have a shortage of Black educators. It is less than 6% as of 2021. Um, Prior to that, 2019, right before COVID started, the numbers were around 7 to 8%, but there's been a rapid decline since. Now, if we don't have educators in the public school system who can represent our entire student body, our entire, the entire diversity of students that we have, there's going to be some problems with that. First of all, the cultural disconnect, right? All students have different learning styles, right? Based off of, many different factors. It's incredibly nuanced and subjective. But culture does play a part of it. And so, if we are unable to understand and connect with the student culturally to understand, their learning style, how they speak, how they think, then it's going to cause some blind spots in our lesson plans when we try to engage these students, right? So that's what I mean by critical thinking. Like if we're going to address the problem, it can't be just looking at it through the scope of, well, there's racism that exists and that's why it's happening. No, no, we got to think about it from a standpoint where we're looking at where we are in the world, right? We're looking at what population of black people or what amount of black people within the population are becoming educators. And then we got to look at the amount of black people in the population in general. Representation. That's what I'm getting at as far as critical thinking. Okay. So I'm going to move on to personal experience. Growing up, I came into the education system uh, already. Uh, I guess the best way to put it is I came in knowing what to expect. I came in knowing what to expect. And that's because culturally, black people, we prepare our children from a young age on, how to behave when it comes to race. How do we, how do we enter situations to make sure that we're safe when it pertains to race? This is, again, when we talked about the critical thinking portion, culturally, there are stigmas that are placed on black people. There are stereotypes that are placed on black people. And to avoid those stigmas and stereotypes, we perform in a certain way or we behave in a certain way to let people know that we aren't aggressive or hostile or belligerent. There are certain things that we have to do and certain things that we teach our children for their safety. um, Code switching is one of those tactics. You know, if anybody doesn't know, code switching is when you use a different way of speech or language to access a certain area. It is a type of uh, social currency in a way where we're able to navigate different spaces and areas, job interviews, conversations with teachers, um, by speaking in a different way, a way more pleasing, a way more acceptable, right? Um, so again, back to my personal experience. As a child, I did not have many black teachers. The first time that I ever had a black teacher was in the fourth grade, and then that was the last time. His name was Mr. Seth. Uh, he was a great guy. Spoke three different languages so he could connect to his students because he had some multilingual students. He was firm but fair, and he was able to see me for who I was, see my problems, understand me, and really reach me in a way that none of my other teachers cared to do. Um, moving forward, I didn't have any more black teachers. Um, I remember going to school in Harlem, Mont Hall Academy, IS 195. All of my teachers were white. Uh, they didn't really have much experience dealing with minorities, especially black children. They would write us off a lot. They would call us wild and loud. They wouldn't try to, you know, reach us or teach us from where we were. They held a different standard for us. I remember that, you know, any of my peers who weren't black, um, if they did something that I did, they wouldn't get in trouble for it, but I would get in trouble for it. The smallest thing, the smallest uh, action would get the harshest punishment. I was suspended at times for speaking out in class. I specifically remember being getting an in-home suspension one time because during Black History Month, one of my teachers decided to play Schindler's List and give us a project about Schindler's the movie. Um, for those of you who don't know, Schindler's List is a movie that has to do with the Holocaust. And I said, "Hey, it's Black History Month. Why are we watching Schindler's List? Why aren't we learning about, Black history?" And she took that as anti-Semitism, actually, because I asked that question. She happened to be Jewish, and I got an in-home suspension for that. So that's just one example of personal experience, um, where not understanding the culture or not understanding how to reach your students or not knowing anything about the culture can be a detriment to you and the student. So let's look at the statistical data, right? So we talked about how less than 7% of teachers in the U.S. are black, and I don't think that it's a coincidence that on average black students receive harsher punishments than their white counterparts. They have the highest rate of at home and in school suspensions. Um, they have less access to resources than other students who come from predominantly white neighborhoods, and that is a socioeconomical issue, but it connects to the race portion, right? So we have students coming from um, low income neighborhoods, right? And because of the amount of money that your neighborhood is able to generate, it reflects on the amount of resources that your school has. Okay. And if your school has less resources, then that means you have less amenities, less activities, older textbooks, right? Now, the people coming from these neighborhoods are predominantly black and Latino. Um, the teachers that we send into these neighborhoods are novice teachers. On average, these schools receive more novice teachers and new teachers than veteran teachers and highly skilled ones, right? This is something that I experienced growing up. A lot of the teachers were coming from Poughkeepsie and upstate, and it was their first time ever teaching, let alone stepping foot inside of a black neighborhood, right? So a lot of the messages we received just from being in these areas, just from growing up in these places and being black, was that you deserved less because of where you're from, and you're gonna get less because of where you're from. And the only way to get out of that is to test out of it, right? So, some more statistics that we have. Research has shown evidence of systemic bias in teacher expectations for African American students, and non black teachers were found to have lower expectations of black students than black teachers. That goes along with the socioeconomic piece, right? So we have white teachers coming from, you know, predominantly rich neighborhoods to these low income neighborhoods where there are black students and they don't understand the culture, but they might feel sorry for them, right? They might not be able to reach them, but they'll be able to make things easier for them. This is shooting the students in the foot, essentially, giving them a crutch when really you need to expect more of them, or not more of them, I should say. You need to expect the same thing that you would expect from students not from those areas or students who come from rich, white, affluent neighborhoods. You need to give them the same level of education and help them reach those same standards because if not, you're setting the bar lower for them when they move on to the next grade or look to go to college. They're not going to be equipped, right? So, another statistic that we're going to look at is African American students are less likely than white students to have access to college ready courses. And in fact, in 2011 to 2012, only 57% of black students have access to a full range of math and science courses necessary for college readiness, compared to with 81% of Asian American students and 71% of white students. Okay, so this racial inequality isn't just someone who is racist towards another student. I think that's the reoccurring thing that we're getting out here. It is systemic. And again, these courses aren't being offered to these students because of their socioeconomic background, right? We can say, oh, well, it's their fault for being poor, but that's a ridiculous notion to have, right? We also got to look how this trends throughout the United States. If we have low income neighborhoods with African American students not being able to produce enough money or pull together enough resources for certain classes, then we're going to have a trend of students with poorer grades than their white counterparts, which is going to support the worst narratives you could think of being pushed by people who are racist, people who do have prejudices and biases against black people and other minorities, right? So, racial inequality in public schools isn't just an issue of someone calling a student a racial slur or someone treating a student poorly because of the color of their skin. It's something that is deeply systemic and it is on some level by design, right? Uh, right here. Extensive research has shown that racial messages youth receive can influence their racial identities, thereby playing a key role in shaping how youth view, experience, and interact with the world. Okay. I'm going to bring up my own personal experience again. I come from an impoverished neighborhood. I came from Harlem. I grew up in the early and late 2000s, right? The messages that I received in public education were, for lack of better words, awful. Absolutely awful. I was shocked. I was taught to aim low, to do the best that I can with what I had, but to aim low, to not dream too big. Um, Satisfactory was the standard, and if I wanted to make it out, then I had to keep my head down, keep my head low, not make any noise, be docile and complacent, but consistent. And at best, I would be what? A janitor. Um, I was encouraged to join sports programs more than I was encouraged to look for, college opportunities or internships that would lead me to better positions in life, right? And so these messages didn't just come from white teachers. These teachers came from black teachers, Hispanic teachers. Um, when you come from a neighborhood where there's a lot of crime and violence and there's a lot of poverty, a certain message gets pushed towards you as a black student, right? And that message is either you pick up a ball, you pick up a microphone, or you pick up a hammer, right? Um, that's just as plain and simple as it can get. And the teachers don't make it any better when they push this narrative onto you. When they see, where you're coming from and they think this is the best that you could do, it doesn't help, right? It kind of distorts the student's self-image. And other students who see that student who aren't black, they buy into that narrative, right? And then it dictates how they treat you. So I guess some of the key takeaways um, that I want you guys to understand from my project is it's not it's not always about what someone says to you, like calling you names, or it's not always about a teacher treating you poorly because you're black. There are systemic like barriers in education when it comes to being a minority student. Um, that being said, I'm gonna close up with this because I know it's getting long. Black students, I think I brought this up before, but black students make up for more in-home and at-home suspensions than any other demographic. Um, they're punished twice as much as their white counterparts. They're viewed as hostile and aggressive by teachers. And this problem isn't unique to just black on white. In fact, there is a sociological study that shows teachers' eye movements being tracked through a camera, and they're set up with four students. Two students are white, two students are black. Each has a boy and a girl. And they tell them that one of the students in the video is going to misbehave. And we want you to press the enter key when that student starts to misbehave. Now, in the video, none of the students misbehave. All of them are well behaved children. But like I said, the camera is tracking the eye movement of the teachers in the video. Almost 100% of the time, I'm not making this up. Almost 100% of the time, I think the number was in the high 90s. The eye movement of the teachers, whether they be black, white, male, or female, were tracked to be looking only at the black students, and more often than not at the black boy students. So there's a culture that needs to be addressed when it comes to addressing racial inequality in public schools. And I hope that you all take this message seriously because um, I know that we're all planning on being educators, and it's a problem that needs to be addressed. So thank you for your time. You guys take care.